You are listening to the Football Diehards podcast with your hosts, Justin Lonero and Bob Harris, sponsored by DraftKings. Sign up now using promo code DIEHARDS, DIEHARDS. Make a first-time $5 deposit, and you'll receive a free $3 ticket.
Hello and welcome to the Football Diehards podcast. I'm your host, Justin Lonero, along with my co-hosts, as always, Mr. Kyle Dvorchak, Mr. Bob Harris. Gentlemen, it is week 3 already. Things are moving along quickly, as they always do. Mr. Harris, what's going on in Albuquerque, New Mexico tonight?
I feel like you're trying to seduce me with the sound of your voice. It's almost working. It's injury week, and hello, Kyle. Welcome aboard to you as well. I just want to rail through some of these injuries, or I'll even roll through them. While I'm railing through them, I will rail against them. It's what I'll do. I'm sure everyone was watching football on Sunday was aware of the agony that was being inflicted upon all of us, but I'll recount it so you all have a good feel for where we're at. And of course, all the detailed accounts of all this available at footballdiehards.com, the website associated with this very podcast. You can read the team notes by me that start the week, and then there'll be massive, copious quantities of updates. Plenty of discussion from Kyle on live audio and video and ourselves, Justin and myself, articles by all of us. So lots of information available on the details of this. But Christian McCaffrey will miss at least 3 weeks. He's on IR, probably miss more, could be 4 to 6 weeks. Mike Davis is next man up for the Panthers. The New York Giants, Saquon Barkley, season-ending torn ACL. Dion Lewis is first man up. Wayne Gallman and Devonta Freeman just signed this week. Not sure what I expect from him early. Maybe these guys will be interested. I'm not just yet. Want to see something from him. Courtland Sutton, torn ACL. He's done for the year. Drew Lock out 2 to 5 weeks in Denver. Jerry Jeudy pick up the pace a little bit. Maybe some of the other weapons there, Noah Fant. They'll do so with Jeff Driscoll. And once again, Philip Lindsay will not be playing this week, it appears. The 49ers, a disaster. Seems like Jimmy Garoppolo will not play. Nick Mullen likely to start. That could change. George Kittle could play. They're worried about the field. The field that they're playing on in New York against the Giants is the same field they played on against the Jets. They were very worried and upset about that field. Complained. It's been tested by the NFL. They say it's okay. But Kittle's appearance could depend on how confident they are in that turf. Raheem Mostert will not play. Tevin Coleman will not play. Could miss up to a month. Could go on IR and miss up to a month with his knee injury. Beyond that, Devontae Adams, uncertain, says it's too early to tell if he'll play. Hamstring injury. Julio Jones, hamstring injury. His status bears watching. A.J. Brown, unlikely to play with the same bone bruise to his knee that was an issue last week, kept him off the field last week. Kenny Golladay could return this week, back on the practice field Wednesday. Chris Godwin should return. Justin Herbert will start at quarterback for the Los Angeles Football Chargers. Tyrod Taylor sadly had his rib punctured while getting a pregame pain-killing injection last week between the coin toss and the kickoff. That's why you didn't hear about it until Herbert was on the field against the Chiefs. So lots of injuries to roll through. Check the footballdiehards.com website for more detailed information. Check the staff rankings when they go live. You'll have links to all these injury issues and more. What we're here for, though, fellows, is the DFS. That's the daily fantasy sports, the football in particular. And we're going to roll through position by position as we always do. Justin is going to give us every single player on the field. Kyle will give you a finer point on it. Justin, quarterbacks, go.
Be a little different this week and start at the bottom. I mean, there's an assortment, an array that you can pick from. I'm going to condense my list as I do every Sunday afternoon. And it's going to start right off with Mitchell Trubisky at Atlanta, 5,700. The Falcons have been gashed two weeks in a row. I see no reason why Mitch Trubisky can't do that as well. We have yet to see Allen Robinson do his thing. Just miscommunication after miscommunication on the field. I think he's due as well. So 5,700, I will be in on Mitchell Trubisky. Week 3 at Atlanta. Again, a porous secondary. Give me some Mitch Trubisky. I don't feel confident when I do it. but I'm going to do it anyway. Up top, you naturally have to look at Russell Wilson and Dak Prescott. That game there is going to be an absolute shootout. Russ has been as good as a quarterback as we've seen in a long, long time, and efficient. Dak Prescott only has 2 touchdowns. I'm going to lean Russ Wilson. I wouldn't kick Dak Prescott out of bed week 3. I think in tournaments, Josh Allen, with his rushing equity, has been as good as anybody. I think his ceiling is as high as anyone's. Gets a whole matchup against the Rams, liking that in tournaments as well. Last guy I'll throw at you is obviously Kyler Murray. I think he's going to kind of come back down to earth. I don't know that it's going to be this week at home, but it's probably going to be 4 or 5 quarterbacks, and I'm going to obviously trim that down to probably 3, and it's going to be Russ Wilson, and I'll have an awful lot of Mitch Trubisky.
I don't believe you'll trim it down to 3. Kyle, your list already pre-trimmed. Tell us more.
Yeah, I don't foresee any sort of coming back to earth from Kyler Murray. I think this is a man who is going to the moon and never coming back. When you look at what he's doing with his legs, that is really, it is Lamar Jackson-esque. He's got 150 yards on the ground, a little over 150 through 2 games. This is something we saw on his college tape. He brings it to the NFL. He is simply one of the best, if not, I'll say at least probably the number 2 athlete at the quarterback position. And he has been accurate. He hasn't really pushed the ball down the field too much. You don't necessarily have to when you've got DeAndre Hopkins on your team. So for me, he's a guy with 300, 100 upside. That is a double bonus on DraftKings. A guy I am actively getting into all of my cash game lineups. The 6,800 price is just far too low for the fantasy points he's putting up. I have some interest in Joe Burrow. I think this Cincinnati-Philly game could have some points. Both of the defenses are nothing really that concerns me. And on offense, Joe Burrow, I mean, leading the NFL in pass attempts by a wide margin. They're a team that either they're going to be efficient at some point. I do believe Joe Burrow will be one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL at some point in his career. I'm not sure it happens right now. He hasn't been particularly efficient through his first 2 games. But if that doesn't happen, that means they're throwing the ball a ton. So they're either good, bad, or good. Either way is great, and the Philly side is going to be chalky, so I think it's a good way to leverage that. You can still get access to Miles Sanders, but then you run it back with Joe Burrow and the number 1 player in the NFL in terms of air yards, A.J. Green. I'm not sure what A.J. Green has left in the tank, but Joe Burrow and the offensive scheme seem to think that he still has something, so I'm just buying me them air yards. So I'm stacking Joe Burrow and A.J. Green. Outside of that, those are going to be my 2 highest owned players on the slate. I think you can. I don't hate the Mitch Trubisky call. The matchup makes sense.
Yeah.
I like me some Justin Herbert. This Carolina defense is terrible in a number of ways. Some of the league's worst corners. They can't defend the run either. Immediately comes in and targets Austin Eckler. I believe it was 4 targets to his 1 target in week 1. That shouldn't be surprising. Tyrod Taylor is a guy who can both take away overall plays with his legs and isn't going to be targeting his running backs because of those legs. Justin Herbert has those legs, but they're not going to hamper him from getting Austin Eckler the ball. I even think Josh Kelly is in play as well, and obviously Keenan Allen, a target hog. I think this game is going to go under-owned because every game is going to go under-owned relative to the matchup of Dak Prescott and Russell Wilson.
Cam Newton. Any thoughts on Cam Newton? Real quick, I talked to Lincoln Kennedy today, former Oakland Raider, and I said, what do you think about the game this weekend, Lincoln? He said, I haven't watched the tape on the Patriots yet. Cam Newton's good. Are you guys liking Cam Newton this week? I mean, I don't even hit on him.
I think Cam Newton's a viable play every single week right now. I mean, we've seen him do it with his legs. We've seen him use his arm, and he gets some things going. I think, in general, by the way, Kyle foreshadowing what could be a sampling at the tight end position. But yeah, I'm kind of in on Cam. I kind of like the way he threw the ball. I like the way we went to N'Keal Harry and Julian Edelman, suddenly a deep threat. Kyle?
Yeah, I mean, that is kind of the idea with targeting Cam Newton is that the stacks are so simple. It is N'Keal Harry. It is Julian Edelman. That is it. Mm-hmm. Both of these players enter the week with over like a 25% target share. And I saw someone throw it out there on Twitter that Julian Edelman looks so gassed because it's the first time he's actually had to run downfield. This is exciting. Mm-hmm. They're using him in at least a bit of a different way. N'Keal Harry getting a ton of targets. It's a 2 wide receiver offense, and that is just about it. So the stacks are easy, which makes it that if you get Cam Newton right, you've almost certainly got his receivers right, which is a good edge to have in tournaments.
I feel like we need a Ryan Izzo going, what? GIF or something right
And he wants to get paid, right? I mean, that's the thing, too. When you look at some of these quarterback contracts, just enormous contracts. When you look at Cam Newton making the veteran base minimum this year of a shade over $1 million is just insane.
Yeah, did Lincoln Kennedy also say nothing about that?
No, it was very brief. But the conversation was about Hunter Renfrow, and he was kind of asking me, well, what do you expect? What are your expectations? I was like, I want to see a little more underneath, buddy. Well, there's a lot of weapons, so that was the
yeah. There is a lot of weapons, and one of them is Darren Waller, and apparently he's getting everything. Kyle, your running backs.
Yeah, for me, up top, I think it is totally fine to just split your ownership between Zeke and Henry. I'm going to give the edge to Ezekiel Elliott. The game environment in this crazy high total, I believe at 55.5, is so much better than Tennessee versus Minnesota. Of course, the Minnesota defense, no resistance given from them. But Seattle's defense, I'm not concerned with them either. Ezekiel Elliott, the touchdown upside is there. The receiving upside is there. So I don't think Henry is a bad play. I do like Zeke as a better play. I think the only way maybe that shifts is if you run, a Dak stack where you're getting a lot of passing game. That necessarily means that Zeke, I don't want to say bust, but just doesn't have a great game. In which case, yeah, you can pivot to Derrick Henry, but I'm going to be over the field on Elliott and probably under or best with the field on Derrick Henry. It's just the receiving game upside. It really is so hindering that he needs to go well over 100, and he probably needs to score twice to be a tournament play, whereas Zeke can get 5 to 6 catches, 60 yards, and that is a big difference maker over Henry. Moving down, a handful of other guys I like, Chris Carson in the same game, basically for the same reason. I think I can sneak out some touchdowns. Beyond that, I don't know how good I feel about any of these cheap running back plays outside of Mike Davis. Mike Davis steps into an immediate role. We saw him rack up like 8 catches for 74 yards, I think was the line, with McCaffrey out. They're not going to be able to change their entire offensive philosophy of throwing to the running back in the span of like 6 days. They're probably going to throw to the running back less, but that doesn't mean 0 targets for Mike Davis. It probably means a solid projection of 3 to 4 targets at a minimum. So for me, Mike Davis, I believe is 5,100, is the only running back out of, you could call it like Jerick McKinnon, Darrell Henderson, Dion Lewis, and some other guys in the mix. These cheap new starting running backs, Mike Davis is the one I want to go to most, and really the only one I feel confident in going to.
Justin, tell him why Joshua Kelly shouldn't have been left off his list.
Yeah, he's about as far low as I am going to go. And I think, after 25 touches week 2 against that Panthers defense is pretty enticing. But, I think we're quick to forget what Austin Eckler is doing. It's a committee there, but obviously the Chargers like Kelly. They're going to use him. And I think it just depends on the script and the way the flow of the game is going. So I'll probably have a dabble of Kelly. I'm not going to be mad at you for using Jerick McKinnon. I think he's going to be highly owned. I cannot see him having 20, 25 touches. I think you got to be content with 12 for McKinnon. Again, I'm starting down at the bottom. I think Kenyon Drake is in a good play, in a good spot at home this week. We really haven't seen what he's fully capable of doing in the receiving game and the rushing game. I think he's a great tournament play against a Lions team that just got absolutely destroyed. Gentlemen, Miles Sanders at home against Cincinnati. We saw last week what we've been hoping for all offseason, and he has arrived. And something has to arrive for the Philadelphia Eagles offense, and I think that is him, and I think it's going to help Carson Wentz in a kind of a tune-up game week 3. So Miles Sanders for me, I think he's projected pretty high. I think he's going to be highly owned, and I will have some of him. And again, like Kyle was talking about Zeke, the involvement in the passing game is helps a good bit here. So I'll get 25 from him and move on. Not mad about the Chris Carson play. I think James Conner and Jonathan Taylor are both in fantastic spots as well. These are bottom of the barrel run defenses that some of these, 6,700 for Conner and 7K for JT. Volume. We love it. And, you're not going to be able to have all these guys. So it is going to come to a decision whether you want Zeke or do you want Derrick Henry. And I completely agree with Kyle in terms of Derrick Henry. He's got to punch a couple in. He's got to have 150 yards, 160 yards on the ground because we know that he's not involved in the passing game. So that's scary. But that being said, he hasn't gotten the end zone yet, right? So the touchdowns are coming. And I don't know that this is the week to get off him against the Minnesota Vikings. So it's a pretty short list. I hope you guys are proud of me. But that's all I got. And obviously Zeke, because we are going to want a piece of this or pieces of this Cowboys Seahawks game. And you're going to want to be a little different. I think Zeke at the top is going to be less owned than Derrick Henry. So I think he almost feels safer as well.
I'm very upset that I can't get you mad at me. That seems like a worthwhile endeavor, but
thick skin.
I guess
You taught me that.
You're doing well. Kyle, let's go to the wide receiving position. Seems like there's some points to be had.
Yeah, there are points on the board on this slate with the clear chalk obviously being Dallas. I do find it really interesting, though, that obviously Amari Cooper is projecting as one of the more popular plays, but Michael Gallup getting way more popularity over CeeDee Lamb, despite the fact that CeeDee Lamb has just wildly outproduced him in terms of the actual raw production, but the targets as well as out-targeting him. I don't get why not only CeeDee Lamb isn't priced over Michael Gallup, I believe that he's like just 100 or 200 below Gallup right now, but the ownership is really what is surprising me. I think given that we've only seen Gallup, I don't want to say bust, but he's had 2 weeks that were not winning you tournaments, and then he comes in week 3 priced over CeeDee Lamb, who at this point I think is securing his role as the team's number 2 receiver. I am taking the small $100 price discount, running to the bank with that, and then the ownership discount is really what I love in tournaments. I think almost all of my DAX stacks are going to feature Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, and potentially Dalton Schultz, but at least those two. And I'm just leaving Michael Gallup on the cutting floor. If he was the low ownership pivot, he'd be the guy I'd be going to. I just don't get what the public is seeing in Michael Gallup over CeeDee Lamb, specifically in that duo. Deshaun Jackson at 5,200. With Jalen Reagor out, you really have to consider Deshaun Jackson the number 2 player in terms of air yards, is a guy who I think there is a good chance that both he and AJ Green in this game get to finally convert on their air yards. So for me, both of those guys, especially AJ Green, I'm looking at ownership projections for him sub 3, sub 2%. Absolutely, I am getting on board with AJ Green. I'm not sure how long it lasts, certainly at his age with his injury history. I don't know if he's a long-term play, but in one specific week, I am absolutely going to have me some AJ Green. Paying up top, I mean, DeAndre Hopkins is great. You're pairing him with Kyler Murray, Calvin Ridley, another awesome play. I think Stephon Diggs in this range at 7K. I get why people would want to play Calvin Ridley over him. I get why people would play Mike Evans over him, but he's going to go so under-owned in a matchup that should feature 2 teams playing at a high pace. Josh Allen looks just unstoppable. One of the best, maybe the best player through 2 weeks of football, has improved as a passer greatly, and we know he still has rushing upside. I want to get his weapons on my teams, and maybe Stephon Diggs plus another year of progression is just what he needed to finally ascend to QB stardom. I'm not sure I'm buying it, but on a single game in a matchup where I think the Rams could play, they will play at a high pace if they're losing. I expect Buffalo to win this game. It could be a back and forth shootout. I'm playing Diggs, and I'm also playing the Rams guys, Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp, at 0 ownership or damn near close.
Yeah, I owe many apologies after last week to many players. Stephon Diggs, you're on that list. DJ Moore, you're on that list. Hey, Carl Davis, do better, man. Many players. So much disrespect and slander coming from me towards so many great players that I'm trying to fix that this week. That's why I'm paying attention to Justin's wide receivers, because I know he'll steer me correctly.
Again, I'll try to start at the bottom again. I think it's necessary. I think this pool is deep as it is every week. You look at Paris Campbell being out, going back to running backs real quick. I think Naheem Hines comes into play. I think his usage is bumped with the Campbell loss. The Colts like him. So just a little quick side note right there. As I scroll up, I'm not going to be mad at you for using Golden Tate in some type of stack. I think 4,500 with Sterling Shepard going on IR makes a lot of sense. Kind of came into his own last week. The targets were there. If you need a cheap piece, last piece, I think you can go to Slayton or Golden Tate. I think Slayton has showed us the upside. I think you feel a little safer with Golden Tate being kind of that inside guy for Jones. Russell Gage is 5,100 in a game that we think can shoot out. So there's 2 Falcons wide receiver ones, and neither of them are named Julio Jones. And one of them is 5,100 in Russell Gage. Matt Ryan has a rapport with him, 21 targets over the first 2 weeks. I'm right there. I'm going to use Allen Robinson. I mentioned Trubisky. I'm probably going to run it back with Russell Gage. And Julio's a little dinged up too. So that's something that we're watching. As I continue to scroll, completely on board with the CeeDee Lamb at Seattle take for sure. You know what's interesting? Amari Cooper, I just tweeted this out. CeeDee Lamb, Cooper, Michael Gallup, 35 receptions this year, 0 touchdowns, and 2 for Dak Prescott on a high-octane Cowboys. So you know that the touchdowns are coming eventually. This is probably the week. By the way, Kyle, Will Fuller, 6K. Should we go back to him this week? Or
I won't stop going back to Will Fuller.
Interesting, you guys. Who is surprised that he's not on the injury report?
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, he was on the sideline, right, getting his legs stretched out by trainers, and then for him to not even show up on the injury report, did he just get shut down? I don't even.
He's fine.
He's fine, and he just hates fantasy.
Yeah, it's really, really, really frustrating player for certain. I know you guys want me to shut up, but I won't. You mentioned Kupp and you mentioned that Bills game, and I like it too, and I definitely like Diggs, and I think he's going to go under-owned for sure. I'm a little worried about Jalen Ramsey. I don't know, where he'll play, if he'll chase Stephon Diggs around. If he does, that's obviously a problem for Diggs. DeAndre Hopkins, Kyler Murray, I mean, it feels as good, safe as you're going to get. So obviously you're going to have some DeAndre Hopkins at sub 8K. Ridley, of course. And in that Tampa Bay Denver game, Mike Evans is underpriced, and so is Chris Godwin. I think a sneaky Tom Brady, Godwin, or Evans stack makes some sense in Denver. You're not talking about the old Broncos secondary. I mean, this is a team that he could go up there and absolutely gash. So I'll have some Mike Evans or Godwin. I got to check out ownership and go with the lesser owned guy, especially in tournaments. So, and of course, I mentioned Allen Robinson with my Trubisky stack, so I don't have to go there. I think we're going to finally see it come together. I think this is the week where it comes together. 18 targets so far. The touchdowns will come. Squeaky wheel gets the grease. And we are going to be zeroed in on that Seattle-Dallas game. The ingredients are there. I have made one lineup right now. I've got to go ahead, Wilson and Metcalf and Lockett. And then, you have to find, I think you can get Cooper and CeeDee Lamb in the lineup and just stack the whole game. So feel safer about Tyler Lockett. I think Metcalf is safe as well, just doesn't get the volume that I think Tyler Lockett gets. So there's an array like every other week, but that's my list as of now. Pretty condensed list so far. It's only Wednesday. Yep.
Look at you go. Well, I know the tight end list will be longer, probably 30, 40 guys, but give it to me.
All right, I don't see a need to pay up this week. Not that I'm ever paying up, really. I was on Tyler Higbee last week. I think that, what he did last week obviously is contingent on where he's at this week. As I look at Darren Waller and I try to get into the mind of Bill Belichick, what do you do against the Las Vegas Raiders? And I'll tell you, when you look at that Raiders offense, it's Josh Jacobs, it's Darren Waller, but I would try to take Darren Waller out of the game. So that concerns me a little bit, but he's underpriced for what his capabilities are. 5,700, probably going to have to go there, but I know how Bill Belichick operates, and he's probably going to want to take Darren Waller out of the game, have Derek Carr beat him elsewhere with Ruggs or Edwards, or even underneath with Hunter Renfrow. You mentioned Noah Fant earlier, Bobby. Obviously the Courtland Sutton injury sucks. So is it going to be Judy? I think so eventually, but for now, it is the athletic Noah Fant. So I think he makes sense in some tournaments. Paying way down, I tweeted something out about Drew Sample. Instant rapport with Joe Burrow after CJ got hurt the other night. 9 targets, 3,500. I'm in at that price. I think Mo Alley Cox is another guy at 3,800. If Jack Doyle does not suit up, you got to go back to. I was there last week. The price hasn't moved. Get the lowly Jets at home. Absolutely. So Cox, Sample for me. Obviously, I mentioned that Dallas-Seattle game. You guys mentioned Dalton Schultz, in that Jason Witten role.
The real Blake Jarwin, as we call him.
Exactly. So 4,500, and you're not breaking the bank either. 10 targets last week. Dak likes him. And that's impressive when you look at that wide receiver cast in Dallas, and of course the usage you're getting out of Zeke, and Dalton Schultz can still command 10 targets. That's pretty impressive. So I'll take that all day long. Really uncertain what's going on in Philadelphia on numerous levels outside of Sanders. So I don't want to play any meeny money mo with Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert each week. But if they're going to score points, it's going to go through these guys where they have a depleted wide receiving core outside of Deshaun Jackson, like Kyle said. The list is short. The list is cheap. And that's really all I got for you.
Kyle, who you got?
Yeah, the thing with eeny, meeny, miny, mo is that it's predictable. It has an even number of syllables if you play it the way I do, meaning you know who it lands on every week. And I am telling you, it is landing on Dallas Goedert every week, leading the team in all receiving metrics, on top of being massively more efficient. I believe his yards per target is over 7, whereas like Zach Ertz is, I think, sub 5. He is a guy who he was in his prime at one point, but then they drafted a tight end who's incredibly athletic, who's productive in college, and is now seemingly taking over. I don't get why we can't just lean into this. You're still getting a small price discount of $5,100 to $4,900, and Zach Ertz is projecting as a particularly popular play at tight end. Is it possible that he is just last year's Dallas Goedert and Dallas Goedert's last year's Zach Ertz, that he is now not only the number one tight end on his team, but also the number one receiver, because that is the role that the tight end plays for Philadelphia as it stands right now. So I'm going to be well over the field on Dallas Goedert because I think he is a good play at $4,900, and I think he's awesome leverage over the older, less efficient, and now less volume-laden Zach Ertz. I love that pivot in tournaments. I think it's I'm not saying you have to go there in cash, but $4,900 is certainly just a good, solid projection for Dallas Goedert as well. Going down, I like the Drew Sample call. He was a almost befuddling pick coming out of, I believe, Washington, because he was cited as essentially only a blocker. But man, if you're going to play every down on Cincinnati, who is passing more than any other team in the league, I have to be at least considering playing you. If I'm looking to pay up, I don't think you have to this week. About as high as I go would be, I think that Tampa Bay is a solid stack, and you could definitely run it back with Noah Fant, who, as Justin alluded to, right now looks like one of the true stud tight ends at the position. I think if anyone who's going to survive either Jeff Driscoll or Blake Bortles, whoever it ends up being as we go down the road, it will be Noah Fant, because he's so athletic. He gets targets, and he gets them reasonably downfield, probably because of his straight line speed. So for me, Noah Fant, I think, is probably only in play in those Tampa Bay runbacks, but I actually think he's a solid play, even if you have to pay up, and he probably does give you very good leverage off of more chalky plays like a Darren Waller. So that's probably where I'm going. Outside of that, I don't think you need to do much else. Logan Thomas is one other name I have to throw out, though. I have been riding this Logan Thomas train, and although he is not hasn't blown up yet, he's averaging 10 fantasy points a game. He has that blow up in his range of outcomes because he is right now operating as not only the number 2 receiver in Washington, but borderline the 2B. I think he's tied or maybe ahead of Terry McLaurin in targets right now. And he plays a terrible Cleveland defense against tight ends. It feels like every year, either Cleveland or Arizona, they just trade off being the worst defense against tight ends. Right now, it's Cleveland. So for me, Logan Thomas, a great target share play. Don't love the offense. I'm probably just running him solo, which makes me a little less inclined to get him on my rosters, but you have to consider Logan Thomas at just $3,700.
That is correct, sir, and it should have been last week. Surprising it was not. Still, the targets were there. So what do you have, 9 targets in that one? So anyhow, and by the way, Terry McLaurin, that was Patrick Peterson you were playing against. Didn't anyone tell you?
Yep.
What a game. Okay, Kyle, defenses.
Defenses, I don't think you have to get too fancy. I'm typically not paying up. You just get random games that come from good defenses down at the bottom. So when I look down, I see a few teams that I am at least considering. I would say, namely, you could go with the Lions. I don't love playing against Arizona, but it would be an interesting leverage spot. And, Kyler Murray does tend to take sacks. So for $2,400, if you just get a few sacks off Kyler Murray and a turnover, I think your points per dollar projection is solid there. And it could be a good leverage play specifically, obviously, when you're not playing Kyler Murray. I like Washington, a little more expensive, $3K against Cleveland. Baker Mayfield looked good last week, but he was playing against the Cincinnati defense that doesn't have much, if any, of a pass rush. This Washington front 7 is loaded. All 4 of their starting 4 defensive linemen are first-round picks, led by Chase Young. If they get pressure on Baker Mayfield, we saw in week 1, Baker does not handle pressure well. If he's given a clean pocket, I like his ability to make throws, but they could cause a lot of trouble for this team. So Washington, I think at 3,000 is a great projection play there. Moving up, I think probably the highest I would ever consider going is the 49ers at 35. I think without Saquon Barkley, without Sterling Shepard, this team is lacking weapons. Daniel Jones is almost, I don't want to say he even takes a ton of risk. He just doesn't seem quite aware in the pocket of the pressure that's coming on. So that makes him, he has a lot of time to throw, but sometimes he gets sacked. He fumbles. Last season, he led the league in fumbles by a particularly wide margin. I think it was 14 fumbles, and we hadn't seen that many fumbles in a long time. So for me, 49ers defense, certainly without a handful of playmakers, but I also think they can just scheme up pressure on an unaware quarterback in Daniel Jones.
Justin Lonero, the defenses of choice, sir.
You have bigger stones than I do. When I look at these defenses every week.
There's a joke there, but I'm going to go.
Yeah,
Anyway.
no. Yeah, you can see. Yeah, save it. We try to pay down, but when you look at these defenses, they're not. There's just no plays being created. I mean, the Panthers, the Texans. I paid for the Jets last week. It seemed like a good spot at home, decent spot, I should say. It's just I need a little something. I'm aiming for 10. I'm happy with 10. Get me 10. Get me 11. I think that's going to come from the Patriots at home against Derek Carr. 3,200. We're not breaking the bank. I mean, if there's anything typically, continuous about the New England Patriots, they usually run out a pretty good defense. It's usually at home. I'm liking them to gobble up Derek Carr there. So you're probably going to get 10 out of them. That's what I got to do. I'm not opposed to you going with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and that loaded defense on the road at Denver against Jeff Driscoll. They're doing it all. 5 sacks last week, 2 picks, fumbles. I mean, the Bucs are a good football team all around. I'm okay there. No need to pay way up for the Colts. As much as I love the Steelers, and again, I said last week they're a top 5 unit. I truly believe that. 4K is not going to happen for me. So I'm going to be right in that middle range there because, again, you get cute with these $2,500 defenses or $2,300, and you can easily end up with a 0, 1, or 2. And we're not aiming for that. I mean, I'm not. I would like 8 to 10. I think there's 3 or 4 in the middle range this week that can get us there.
Wow. Well done, Justin. I'm very impressed. Nice, concise, tight, and informative. I've written many notes. Okay, since we have a few extra minutes here, I want to get you guys' take on some of the fab purchases that you'll be making this week. And mostly I just want to know how interested you are in some of these components. Mike Davis, how much of your fab budget are you willing to spend in season long, Justin?
Probably 0, because it's early. We know that running back, they pop up. And if I'm craving Mike Davis at this point in the season, I mean, I'm probably doomed anyway. So not much. I mean, unless I'm really screwed, I would say 30%, but I would be embarrassed to spend any more than that because it's early. And again, we know that running backs pop up left and right. It's just the name of the game. So it's only, people are panicking already. It's like, chill, even if you're 0-2, it's just 0-2. You're not 0-5, you're not 0-6. So it's not the end of the world. So very little, Mike Davis.
Kyle, your budget will be depleted by how much in your pursuit of one Mike Davis?
Yeah, I'm looking to unload the clip on Mike Davis, frankly, because Justin talks about running backs popping up. This is the one that pops up. This is the one. He is the guy who popped up more so than any other back this week. I think the only argument, I think I've changed my tune a little bit. I was more interested as we entered the week in Dion Lewis. That's because they had not signed Devonta Freeman yet. Now that they've signed Devonta Freeman, I don't love Freeman. I don't love Lewis. I think it's unfortunately, if they had signed, I don't know, what is LeGarrette Blount up to? If they had signed a between the tackles grinder, I would still be excited about Dion Lewis as a PPR back for the rest of the season. But at this point, I really am not even sure what to make of it, and I don't want to blow my fab budget on a Dion Lewis or Devonta Freeman because I could get burned with just like chalking up zeros. They could be a guy who ends up being the backup pass catcher and a non-factor between the tackles. So for me, that makes Mike Davis the safest play. You're getting what seems to be at least now 3, but I would say upwards of 6 or more weeks of fantasy. He could be an RB1 and it wouldn't shock anyone based on just PPR production and this offense improving from last year. So for me, Mike Davis, I'm probably going at least 50%. If I stacked up running backs early, went hyper fragile, got, 2 guys at the 1-2 turn and a James Conner in the third, yeah, you probably don't end up really needing to have him. Otherwise, if I have any weakness at flex, which no team or few teams are going to be even crushing it at their final flex, I'm trying to get Mike Davis in there, so 50% seems quite reasonable to me, assuming that I didn't just crush all of my running back spots in the draft.
Right, and I guess that's the what we're looking at here. It's shelf life versus the mixed or the shared workload, the Devonta Freeman arrival for the New York Giants. Justin, your expectations for Mr. Devonta Freeman?
I tweeted something out with some profanity yesterday. It went.
Shocking.
It went. Yeah, it was pretty. A lot of reaction to it, but it was essentially if Saquon Barkley can't run behind that Giants offensive line. How the F is Devontae Freeman, 28-year-old Devontae Freeman off the street. So it's going to be a committee. I think it's been a long offseason. People are going crazy to think that Devontae Freeman's going to roll out of bed behind that offensive line on that offense and just all of a sudden be fine or carry us to the promised land. If you told me that Devontae Freeman was going to get 20 to 25 touches, I would be all in, but I don't think that's the case. I think it's going to be some form of a committee. I think Daniel Jones is going to throw the ball more, and that's just the way it is. And the reality is, why wasn't he picked up sooner? The San Francisco 49ers were in need of a running back. Kyle Shanahan's there, familiarity. There's a reason why he's been unemployed for a little bit. And make no mistake about it, for a little area of time, Devontae Freeman was one of the best running backs in football. The three of us know that. It's just the shelf life is small, and I think the good days are behind him, just like Le'Veon Bell.
It's possible, Todd Gurley says, that the Falcons' usage of their running backs leaves something to be desired. Kyle, what are we getting out of Todd Gurley going forward?
Yeah, at this point, I would say not a ton. I still think he is probably a guy that I don't think many teams are going to have guys they want to start behind him. But I think you can expect maybe an RB2/flex play. This offense definitely has the potential to put up points, but those are largely going to be coming through the receivers. I think Todd Gurley I would project him to score more frequently going forward, because like Calvin Ridley scoring 2 touchdowns a game is not going to be a thing. But Calvin Ridley scoring 0.75, 0.8 touchdowns a game, that could be a thing. Julio Jones hates finding the end zone, but it could happen. Even Russell Gage and Hayden Hurst. There are just so many weapons here that the touchdown upside is there because of the offense, but ends up being kind of capped because of the offense, I guess. And I don't know. He just doesn't look to have a ton of juice regardless. So for me, a flex play at best. Honestly, though, it would not surprise me at all if next week you're actually just starting Mike Davis over him. That's actually probably the perfect example.
Well, this is the thing. It's called the Football Diehards Podcast. It's associated with a website also known as footballdiehards.com. If you're not familiar with it, go there now. Use visit footballdiehards.com/free trial. Plug it in, take the tour. When you're ready to buy, use the promo code DIEHARDS for a 15% discount. Great content throughout the week. News, notes, information, rankings by myself, by Kyle, by Justin Lonero. The Digging in the Crates column, perhaps one of the best things written since Shakespeare. I love it. I read it every week along with all the other content. Evan Tarciano, Matthew Sharon, Brad Cruz, tons of video, tons of audio. So come check it out. And one last question, Justin. What does Lincoln Kennedy think of the footballdiehards.com website?
Oh, he loves it. Actually, that was one of the first things that I talked to him about.
The only thing he talked about, he couldn't stop talking. He was like, Cam Newton, I don't know, I haven't seen him. Oh, Football Diehards, oh my God.
He talked about Hunt. He talked about Football Diehards. He talked
the
about
big link.
Exactly, and he talked about the glory days in Oakland. I thought
you were going to go back to the University of Washington.
Yeah, he was. He did it. He jammed up some. Lincoln Kennedy could ball, Kyle. This was before your time, son. But yeah, and he still does. He still does radio for the Raiders. So I was hoping we would get a little more. He said, "What are your expectations of Hunter Renfrow?" And I said, "Well, my expectations were him to carry over the 18 or so receptions that he left 2019 with and kind of bring it into 2020." And he just kind of said there's a lot of weapons there. So a lot of mouths to feed. He's right.
My expectation is his little dad bod is bruised severely by the end of each week. But that means he's getting some work.
And on that note, we will see you next week, everyone. For myself, at Kyle Tweets here on Twitter, for Bob at Football Diehard, and Justin at Justin Lonero. We will catch you next week. Thanks for tuning in.